So I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Nidhi Sachdeva. Dr. Sachdeva is a leading Canadian researcher in the science of learning, specializing in the intersection of educational technology and evidence-informed learning design. And her work spans a fascinating range of topics, including teacher education, post-secondary instruction, continuing professional education, health education, and patient literacy. She teaches online, learning, and microlearning from a cognitive science perspective at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. I know that's not how you say it. A recognized expert in translating educational research into practical classroom strategies, Dr. Sachdeva co-authors the globally read Science of Learning newsletter and currently serves as chair of the Research Ed Toronto Conference. As a mother of 3 children, 10 and under, Nidhi does not have a ton of spare time, but when she does, she enjoys creating delicious-smelling soaps. Please welcome Nidhi Sachdeva to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Whew, you all decided to sit over there. That's fine. I heard when people heard Canadian, oh, thank you. Yeah, yes, come on up. Come on up everywhere. I'll be walking around. So I can't tell you what an honor it is to be in this room. I mean, just alone standing here is rather intimidating experience, but you all are gonna help me feel at home, so thank you for coming. I'm really excited to talk about a topic that's really dear to me. I absolutely love talking about it. Julia, my friend, gave a really beautiful intro for me, so thank you, and thanks all for joining this session. So I want to talk to you about a notion that an amazing cognitive psychologist, an amazing researcher who's given us a gift of a lot of great knowledge, Robert Bjork from UCLA, has called, and it's called desirable difficulties. And he called it back in 1994. And the idea behind this phrase is that there are certain conditions of learning that at first appear to make progress of learning slower. Think working out in a gym, running, right? But these are the very conditions that lead to long-term learning. That's what we're trying to do. Now, it sounds obvious in some ways. That's why I called it no pain, no gain, such a popular phrase. But it sounds obvious in some ways, but it has huge implications on how we design instruction or training programs, which I know a lot of you do, and also how folks may want to approach self-regulated learning, because there's a lot of incorrect, ineffective techniques we tend to employ. Not for any reason, but just because learning is very counterintuitive. I'm going to be talking about that. So we're going to unpack this notion today. But I want to check with you. What is your understanding of how is knowledge stored in our working memory, or in our memory system, my apologies, in our memory system, something that we can't really see, but we got it up here somewhere. So we're going to do a little Slido. So if you have your phones, please take it out and try to answer this question. Okay, maybe you could just answer back to me. So here's the question, I'll read it because I can see it. Which of the following statements do you think describe how memory system works? It's like a filing cabinet and it stores information exactly as we learned, ready to be pulled out. Thumbs down, thumbs up. Boo, okay, perfect. It's like a camera and it records experiences just as they happened. Oh, it's there. Okay, there we go. Thank you, tech folks. They're amazing. I might have to go back a slide, let's see. Because yeah, now try it. You should see it now. Try answering. How is memory stored in our memory system, or how is knowledge stored in our memory system? Not sure if it's, are you folks able to see it? Yeah, okay. Let's see. We should see the responses. I'm not sure what's happening. Apologies, tech. All right, Oh, none of the above. Oh, sponge. Okay, I'm loving that. Memory is like a filing cabinet, 2% do think it. And online folks probably also sharing that, people joining online. All of the above, interesting. Okay. Do you know why the green is moving back and forth? That is the correct answer. It's actually none of the above. It is none of the above. And I'm going to walk you all through it. Okay. So, memory is not a perfect storage and retrieval system like a filing cabinet. It'd be cool if it was. You put something, take it out. Oh, I'm looking for this one. Here you go. Doesn't work like that. Neither is it like a camera or a recording device. Because every time you pull something out of your memory, it gets reconstructed. Remember something? And it kind of like takes a different shape. It's not like a recording device. And no, it is not like a sponge. I know we use it quite often. Kids are like sponge, they absorb all the time, and it's very different for when we're learning for retention. Exposure alone doesn't guarantee learning. If it did, then I would just look at what I need to look at and learn, and it will just happen. I did check last time. I don't have that little hole that in the movie they have it. Matrix, just teach me how to fly a helicopter. It didn't work. I just don't have it. Anyways, but what's interesting is we all have seen actually what the memory system looks like inside. And then my next slide will remind you of that. No, it is not also. I mean, that's Riley's inside brain, but our brain system does not look like that. We actually don't know what it looks like. We can only just imagine that. Somewhat like this. This is as much of a complex visual like I could find just to show you it is not a filing cabinet, not a recorder, not a sponge, not straightforward at all. It is so complex. I'll demonstrate that to you. When you think of the word dog, think of all the things that come to your mind. Throw them at me. Dog. Cute. Pet. Soft and furry. Anything else? Allergies, okay. Yes. Drooly. Loving, pardon? Instagram, TikTok, all kinds of videos, yes. Now, let's pick soft and furry for a second. Can something else be soft and furry? Bunnies? Can something else be drooly? Babies? So it's not that mental sort of schema that you had for dog is not being shared by something else, right? It is. So it's quite complex. So it's kind of this interconnected web, and sometimes a smell can remind you of something, a sound can remind you of something. That's how complex memory is. And it's kind of nice. If it wasn't, it would be so boring. Yesterday or day before yesterday, I was driving, picking up my kids, and just certain breeze and the smell of the lilacs just reminded me of something. It's actually quite beautiful to have that web and not such a straightforward thing. So I'm going to let you all read this for a second. Not neat, not passive, not mechanical, effortful, messy, very messy, because we say wrong things and our memory, when we say, my memory is not serving me right, and full of surprises, full of surprises. What Robert Buer called this was human memory is peculiar. I'm going to unpack that for us all in a second. But that's what Robert Buer called it. He said, to be able to understand what I'm saying about desirable difficulties, we have to understand the peculiarities of the human memory system. And the first peculiarity was that it's not so straightforward like a filing cabinet, but it's got so much going on. And I want to walk you through the 3 really amazing things that he talks about. But first, this is what I'm going to try to cover in this session. Peculiarities of human memory system. New theory of disuse. It's not really new anymore. It was from 1994 or something. But that's what it's called, because the original theory was theory of disuse. So when Robert Bjork and Elizabeth Bjork came out with it, they called it new theory of disuse. I'll talk about it. 5 desirable difficulties that are the conditions that enhance what I love to do, long-term learning. Committing to long-term learning, long-term memory is such a beautiful, powerful, has a lot of asset value in what you can actually do, because you're lowering all that load from your working memory at some point. And word of caution, just because I say desirable difficulties are amazing, we don't want to go about making things unnecessarily hard for our learners, employees, training folks, just because. So not all difficulties are desirable. Okay, we'll talk about that. But before we do that, I'm going to show you 5 words. If there's any German speakers, that's fine. You have an asset value here. You got lots of prior knowledge. But I request you all, do not write them. Do not take a picture. Let your memory work. So I noticed that my Team Canada folk here closed the pen. Thank you, thank you. So just let your memory work. I'm going to say the words so you can hear how they sound. Try to memorize them. Fernweh. It's kind of like the opposite of longing for travel, like opposite of homesickness. Schnapsidee. A ridiculous idea that you only get when you're drunk. Torschlusspanik. Torschlusspanik. The panic that is time's running out and I got to do this. You know, I want to have kids before a certain date. I want to have this career. That's kind of feeling. German language, you got to love it. It's beautiful. Preppenwitz. A comeback, you think, no taking pictures. We're going to try to work the memory. No taking pictures. I'm watching you. And last one, Kummerspeck. Kummerspeck, emotional eating when you're sad. Okay, you have 10 more seconds to look at them. No writing. Let your memory work. You heard how they sound. I said them for you. And they should disappear now. Okay, we'll come back to that. All right, peculiarities of the human memory system. Don't worry about those words. Just be in the moment, people. Be in the moment, all right? So first peculiarity of human memory system is information enters a person's memory system. Pretty obvious, right? That's the only way to learn. That's what's happening to you right now. And I want to walk you through what that actually looks like. So this is what I like to call it my advanced organizer, my graphic organizer, to explain to people how learning really happens cognitively. I use it in my course that I teach in the Master of Teaching program from the beginning, week 1 all the way to week 12, and we use the exact same advanced organizer throughout the course. It's really powerful. So all learning, and you may know this is basically the basis of information processing model. Everyone should know this if you're in the business of learning. And what do you know? Everybody learns. It's not just the L&D folks. Kids learn, we learn new skills, we learn to drive, we learn to play certain instruments, things like that. So what happens? First part is sensory memory. Sounds work. So information enters our sensory memory system from usually our visual senses and auditory senses, for the most part, right? So you're listening to me right now, and you're seeing things, what I'm showing you on the slides, and that's information entering into your sensory memory system. Why? Because you're paying attention. If you weren't paying attention, that's not going to happen, right? So that's a necessary requirement. Now, the goal is that we want the sensory sort of information that's brand new. Green squares represent new knowledge here. New knowledge needs to travel to long-term memory. That's what learning really is. But it has to pass through something that's very moody, working memory. It is very limited in capacity and very limited by time for how long things can stay in there. For example, if I gave you 7 numbers, a string of numbers, you'll probably be able to give it back to me. But if I did 20, then you'll be like, whoa. The working memory just feels like, I can't do this, right? So working memory has limitations. I do talk a lot about working memory, but today's session is not necessarily about cognitive load. It's about the bottom part, the long-term memory, learning turning into long-term. But let's say you paid attention, so sensory memory did the job, and working memory, you somehow were able to bring this new knowledge into your working memory, and you were able to do some processing and have that moment of, ah, I get it, yeah? Then we managed to bring it into long-term memory. But this is not it. This memory, this information now needs to connect to what we already know. That's how all learning happens. You're not empty vessels. You have so much background knowledge, and your brain right now is going, that processing, that generated processing is happening. But initially what happens is when this knowledge does come into the long-term memory, which is actually a successful thing, these connections are quite weak. Learn something one time. Are you able to come back to it all the time, right away, and after 2 days, after 2 years? Not really. So there is a skill. That's what we want to do. So these connections are weak. And what we want to do is make these connections stronger so that learning becomes recallable, durable, and transferable. I really think that is an absolutely essential aspect of target of instruction. And this, my friends, is called learning from a cognitive point of view. Cognitive science, the definition for learning, and it's a definition that my dear friend Paul Kirshner has developed, is called learning is the change in long-term memory. And I just demonstrated that to you right now. Long-term memory only had the blue squares, and by the end of it, it now has green squares as well, right? So that was the first step. Human memory stores, information enters. Now what happens to that information? The individual, you all, our brains, is now encoding this information. Now encoding is not so straightforward as storing, like opening a cabinet and putting things in there. It's building those really complex connections, as we were talking about. And all that encoding is happening in the long-term memory. So your long-term memory is an amazing, practically infinite space. You can store or encode as much as you can or want, but it requires some kind of that effort that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So long-term memory is that space where you want to give it the chance, the new knowledge a chance, so it doesn't go away. Okay? That's what encoding is. Not straightforward storing, but connecting to things that you know. And that's building that network stronger. Then comes the third, and one of my favorites in these peculiarities. The individual retrieves or recalls information as a learning event. I'm working on a t-shirt that has to say, recall is a learning event. Because it is. Recall is not just a test, my friends. It is a memory modifier. When you recall, you learn it more. It's pretty fascinating. Anytime you recall something, you just encoded it stronger and better. And that's sort of what Robert Bjork reminded us, that these three peculiarities are really important to understand how memory actually travels, or information actually travels, and what happens to it, and what happens to it if we don't do things like this. Recall or retrieval is one of those. Anytime you recall, you know it better, right? We've done a lot of those things. Happy birthday song, can anybody ever forget it? You've said it so many times, it's like automatized in your heads. Or twinkle, twinkle, right? Or the fact that you're reading now, because you've done so much recall of that sound system, reading the same kind of words, that it's just happening. We'll test that with my words that I shared earlier in a minute. So, quick recap here for you. I'd like to pause so you can see. These three things have got to happen for learning to take place. Okay? All right. Let's see if this works now. I'm not sure if it didn't work last time. All right. Yeah, let's try it. So, quiz time. What does encoding refer to in the context of memory? Let's see. Try answering that, and I'll show the answer in a second. Are you folks able to see it? Okay, I see Some folks, what does encoding refer to in the context of memory? Yeah, submit your answers, because it's like a quiz question, so you can't see the answer yet, but you'll see it in a second when I switch the slide. Pick your answer. It's a non-penalizing experience, zero stakes quiz. All right, shall we look at the answer? Oh, I'm doing a decent job. Good. Yes, it's not repeating, which we naturally think we want to do. It's process of transforming information into a memory. Next question. Which of the following best describes how long-term memory stores information? This one we know. Let's get 100%, people. Let's get 100%. Yes. There's some more answers there. I'm just looking at them, monitoring the number there. And online folks, please also chime in. Let's look at the answer. Yes. You all, yes. Although I do say a teacher's success is measured by student achievement. All right, third question, almost done. This part. What's the role of retrieval, recall in the learning process? What does the act of recalling do in the learning process? Yeah, let's look at the answer. Correct, it's all of the above. I mean, technically, folks who selected the other three options are not wrong, but it is all of the above. It is a learning event, it does strengthen learning, and recall modifies the memory every time you do it. How beautiful is that? How amazing is that as an idea? People associate recalling often with testing, but it is what modifies. The kids do that all the time. What is the sound of a cow? What does a cow say? It's like every time they do it, they learn it more. Memory is consistently changing. Okay, so let's go back to, thank you for that knowledge check, by the way. So let's go back to the long-term memory. So information, this knowledge, these green squares and blue squares, think of them as knowledge or information of some kind networked for some purpose in our brain. We got a lot of stuff in our heads. I know a lot of Bollywood songs, it's unbelievable. I've never tried to memorize them, but I know them so well. I don't know why. But anyway, so it's there. Each unit of information in our long-term memory has two important characteristics. One, it has something that we call it the storage strength, meaning how well it is stored in our long-term memory, how well those connections are made. For example, Twinkle Twinkle has really got a very high storage strength. Happy birthday too, right? But if I asked you times table of 17, I don't think people know it. I mean, 12 I should have, I'm just saying, I'm messing with you. Anyways, but you get the idea. The second is retrieval strength. The second characteristic of any information stored in a long-term memory is retrieval strength. What does that mean? It means the quick of access, the ease of access. How quickly can you recall it, right? So these two things kind of like dance together at all times in our long-term memory. But this is important to understand if we want to make sense of desirable difficulties, why we do that. Okay. So what's interesting is that retrieval strength enhances the storage strength of any unit of knowledge or information. What do I mean by that? The more you recall, the deeper the connections. The more you recall, the deeper the connections, right? So retrieval strength is actually leading to more storage strength. That's what we want, actually. We want knowledge to be stored deeply. Some of the stuff is unnecessary. We don't need to do it for that. So we have to choose what content that might be, but recall is a really important sort of step in there. But the opposite is also true, which means if you don't have enough chances for recall, then you don't have a well-stored knowledge or information. Makes sense? Makes sense. Something you do it once, you may or may not remember it. And we do lots of training like that, unfortunately, right? This basically was the idea that Robert Bjork developed back in the day. Robert and Elizabeth Bjork, I should say. They worked together on this, called the new theory of disuse. And the newness is really only because the previous theory was called theory of disuse, which basically meant what we don't use, it goes away forever from our long-term memory. But the new theory of disuse said that it doesn't really go away. It just becomes more and more inaccessible because its storage strength decreases, and because of that we can't recall it because we didn't recall it when we should have. There is a really beautiful sort of time frame, you know, when you want to recall, and then it becomes stronger again. So that was the new theory of disuse, which is really a fascinating idea to think about, is that we don't necessarily forget, we just make memories a lot more inaccessible, and we know how we can make them more accessible by using the retrieval strength of a knowledge or of a piece of any information so that we can enhance its storage strength. Okay, time for a quote. Look how beautiful it is. And it's so simple. I did not say it, obviously. As we use our memories, the things we recall become more recallable. Pretty obvious, isn't it? A lot of cognitive science is like, yeah, it makes sense, but we forget it when we implement that in instructional design. So, an obvious question, I'm making a case, we should increase the storage strength. How do we do that? We need to do something about it in the long-term memory. And this is where we learn that the techniques and the tools and the strategies and the interventions and the other ways that we're picking are not effective because learning is quite counterintuitive. And I'll explain to you why by means of two scenarios. Here's a scenario A. You learn something new, it goes into your brain, and the question is, how do you know you learned? Did you learn it? How do you know that? Well, usually there is some kind of demonstration of that skill. I learned to sing a song, I learned to play something on the piano, then you show me how to do it. I teach somebody letters, I'm thinking younger learners here, but basically there's a demonstration. But you immediately demonstrate that right away, right? I got this, I'm going to show you. And then we think that we learned it. But in fact, that's just your one-time performance. And I don't mean performance the way we use it in the corporate world, like, you know, long-term performance, but this is like, I could perform that skill right away, of course, because you just learned it, right? Because if I said to you, what's the German word for tree? And I say it's Baum, and I say, what is it? Highly likely you can recall it back to me right away. That's an immediate performance, but it's not learning. Scenario B, we do the exact same thing. You learn something new, but this time we add a bit of a learning condition. It could be time gap, yeah? It could be a recall, a quiz of some sort, which we've been doing a little bit. And then you try to do it, but this time it's not an immediate demonstration, it's a demonstration of your learning. And naturally, we make mistakes. Makes sense, right? And we think about it as, oh, I don't know how to do this. Oh, I didn't know, I didn't learn. And that is incorrect. It, in fact, is learning. Your brain is doing that task, but the poor performance comes across as, I didn't learn. You know that frustration when we all have when you're trying to do something and you've slept and then you come back to that thing 2 days later? Think of playing a sport, think of playing a musical instrument or any other task, or maybe you learn coding of some kind, and you could do it right away, but then you do it a couple of days later and you're just feeling, I couldn't do that. That we associate that with poor performance, but it's actually learning. And that is the counterintuitive nature. So learning in cognitive science refers to the lasting changes in behavior. Things that you could do, recallable, transferable, and durable. But performance is the act of showing it almost always right away. But what we're looking for is long-term performance. Can we do it always, right? So a reminder that, oh, you wanted to go back to that slide? towards the end, maybe. Is that okay? Just at the time. Yeah, we'll get it. We may think that one-time performance is learning, but it is not. But in the same token, reduced performance does not mean absence of learning. You did learn. It's just, and that's the important thing that Robert Bjork wanted us to understand, is that the conditions that produce sort of forgetting or poor performance are the same one that actually will lead to long-term learning as well. Okay? Let's try this for a second, for a minute maybe. So if, for folks who are online, you can share that in the chat. But I want you to think for 1 minute, are you able to articulate what I just said about learning and performance? Because it's one thing to make sense, to think that I know what I said, what Nidhi said, and I got it. But just think for 1 minute. And after the 1 minute, I just would like you to share that with a partner you're sitting next to. And for folks who are online, you can share your answers in the chat. So what does it mean to say immediate performance isn't the same thing as learning? Don't skimp the think. Okay, and if you have a partner, please go ahead and share, think, pair, share. And if you don't, move closer to someone and just share what you think about this idea. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'll call you all back. So think, pair, share. I know we can keep going. I would love that too. But think, pair, share is an interesting, so what I just did was kind of the same idea that you'll notice. It's a bit of a recall that I got you an opportunity to do, where you're now modifying that memory, something that you just learned, and then time to think about it. So there's cognitive benefit to that as well. Also, it's a nice thing to do and to interact with the audience and stuff, but there's lots of benefits. So what happens is, this was the idea that I was saying, that learning is counterintuitive because reduced performance makes one believe that learning didn't take place. But it did. And that's what we need to understand with desirable difficulties. When we introduce desirable difficulties in our learning, in our instructional design, in our training programs, the person on the receiving end will probably feel that reduced performance, but we have to have these conversations and clarify that that is normal, right? My daughter, when she plays a musical piece on the piano, when she learns right away, she's able to do it, sleeps on it, a couple of days later, when she plays it again, more mistakes, the fingering and then things like that, it leaves her frustrated. We've probably all been there in that situation. In that moment, it's like, it's the desirable difficulties working, doing its job, learning is happening. In fact, stronger connections, but that journey is tricky. But that's when we don't want to sort of give up as a learner, right? Or as an instructor or as a learning designer. We want to integrate them not skip out on that because of the fear that it will lead to reduced performance, because that's just immediate impact. But the long-term learning is eyes on the prize. Okay, another quote, and cognitive science reminds us not to read out the quote, but let folks read it, so I'll let you read it for a second or a minute. It's powerful, isn't it? You know what really speaks to me? The experience of having to expend effort, generate errors, or work hard to achieve understanding should not be interpreted as evidence of one's inadequacy as a learner. Instead, it is what's going to lead to long-term learning. That is a very counterintuitive idea. It's like when I'm failing, I'm supposed to believe that I'm learning. It's hard, I know, but that's why we need to understand the depths of this thing. Okay, that brings me to desirable difficulties. So this is all of that I did so far. Desirable difficulties are sitting on that foundation. These are challenges, I like to call them rather than challenges, conditions of learning, that someone who's designing instruction intentionally puts them in there, that will initially cause the discomfort, lead to effort, some errors, but will lead to long-term learning and knowledge transfer. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. Robert Burke has mentioned, and I've watched it in a video, and he's mentioned it to me in a panel that I was on with him. Total honor for me. He said that sometimes I did regret calling it desirable difficulties because even though it's a really nice alliteration, people tend to focus on the difficulties part. You want to focus on the desirable part, right? Because it just sticks with you. But they're desirable because they make learning more durable and flexible. That is the target of instruction. That's what we want to achieve. And they are difficult because they temporarily, key word, temporarily slow down the performance by posing challenges to learners, okay? 5 different kinds of desirable difficulties he talks about. People often use mostly 3. Raise your hands if you've heard of the term retrieval practice, okay? Spaced practice, yeah? Also a desirable difficulty. Interleaving, so hands are decreasing in number as you can see. Contextual interference, yes, because very few people ever talk about that, or that wasn't me. They were not interested in contextual interference. They're like, and the last is reduced feedback as a desirable difficulty. Have you heard of that? It's often missed. So I'm going to talk about all 5 briefly. Now, within 1 hour, I can't do the entire years of work that Robert Burke did, and it's a very complex cognitive science idea, honestly. This is not the cognitive science 101. This is actually a little bit more higher level, but I'm trying my best. So we'll talk about the 5, but it's obviously a quick rundown, but let's go for it. And we'll start with the easy one, spaced practice. As the name indicates, right? It's spreading out learning over time. And you're like, of course, Nidhi, that's a great idea. But we book trainings on 1 whole weekend. Come on. You know this idea, but we still do that. Or I got an email recently from my university. I needed to do a cybersecurity module. And they said, yeah, it's like, 5 modules. It will take you about 15 or so minutes for each module. If you do it all together, it'll take you 2 hours only or something. And I'm like, that's exactly what they shouldn't be telling me. Because if I do it, I will remember not much. I'll do it. Doing doesn't mean I learned. But if I'd spaced it out, so you want to make that a culture almost, because the evidence is just so powerful. I'll talk about some of the strategies in a bit, how you could do that. And that added time slows down learning at first. You're not running as fast. It's more like a marathon. You're like pacing yourself. A little bit on a Monday, a little bit on a Tuesday, taking a break on a Wednesday, things like that, right? There's things you can do to integrate spaced practice. I cannot tell you how much evidence we have in favor of spaced practice leads to long-term learning. You may spend more time initially, but you will remember that, or folks that you design learning for, they will remember that for much more longer, so much more used to it. And it produces superior long-term performance. And what does it do? I love putting sound effects in animation. It's recent I've been doing it, recent. It's fun. Get a lot of feedback from my kids about it. Mama, this one. Okay, second, retrieval practice. Very popular, a buzzword right now. And I'm worried that something when that becomes very popular very soon has a tendency to become a lethal mutation. So people are thinking retrieval practice is, well, me doing a recall is retrieval practice. No, it needs to come from your memory system. That's true retrieval. But let's look at what retrieval practice is. Retrieval practice is to recall something from memory without having it in front of you. You're recalling it from your long-term memory. Remember, when you increase the retrieval strength, storage strength also increases. Yes? And it's amazing for long-term retention. Leads to boosted retention of knowledge, and it's easy to do. Build in lots of opportunities for recall, And if you work with, let's say, your own kids, you could do that. If you work with your employees or designing instruction for long-term retention, build retrieval practice in there. Of course, sound effect. Interleaving. Interleaving's tricky, but very, very powerful. It's basically mixing related yet different things in your practice session. So within the context of sports, for example, people like to go to the driving range to be able to improve their golf sort of skills. But then they are hitting the exact same shot all the time. Sorry, I'm not good at it, so I'm not doing that. I should probably use the tennis, but anyways, you get the idea. But in real life, their game will never just be that. They should be practicing different skills that are related within the same field. We don't do that when we design instruction, often. Textbooks are not even like that. Chapter 1, questions related to that chapter. Chapter 2, questions related to chapter. That's not interleaved practice. Try doing interleaving. It actually trips you, and you get confused because it's like, I did this. Oh, is it that concept or this concept? That reduced performance is increasing that storage strength of that memory unit, right? So interleaving is a powerful, powerful tool, and basically we call it mix it up. But don't mix up like really random things. It's kind of like related things, you know. I have nothing against broccoli, but I'd say if you're making a fruit salad, mix fruits, not bring in broccoli in there, right? So it's like different fruits, so that's your interleaving. Also leads to knowledge retention. The fourth one is actually quite similar to interleaving. It's also variation, but instead of the content variation, you're varying the context in which things are happening. So if I'm practicing, again, analogy of sport, a certain way to throw ball in the basketball court, then usually standing at one spot and I, yes, get good at it. But I change the context and I move a little bit away, same shot. I change my context and I try to throw it from somewhere else. Initially would be harder, more errors, but that challenge will lead to sort of contextual interference and will lead to long-term retention. In the context of language learning, right? You learn a certain vocabulary, how to build sentences, or a skill that you learn at work. You change the context by changing the scenario and get folks to feel that challenge a little and then move to it, right? Boosted knowledge retention. Last but not the least, reduced feedback. Very sort of perceptive idea, but not often spoken of as a desirable difficulty. What we're trying to say here is that you want to give as much feedback as possible initially when you're sharing knowledge and somebody is trying to learn it, and they tried it themselves to share in feedback. But over time, using that judgment, you reduce the amount of feedback. That reduced feedback puts the learner in that on my toes situation. I gotta catch my own errors now. I gotta learn from that. But you don't wanna do it instantly. So that's the level of desirable difficulty. It does make challenging sort of things for the learner initially, but it does lead to durable, flexible, and confident self-learning. Okay, so those are the 5 desirable difficulties. And again, I know this is not something I did like, you know, so it takes time, but I have a digital handout for you as well. At the end, I'll share that with you. Okay, go back to it. Try writing those German words that I shared earlier. Don't worry about the spelling. I just thought it'll be fun to do. I'll just be jokes, unless you're so good, which you are, but let's just see. One participant typing, ooh, I can't wait. Fanven, yeah? Fanva, okay, good, close. Fanve, it's actually Fanve. Wonderful. Now don't cheat, try new words. That was the first word. Everybody remembers. I love that. Kummerspeck, Schnapsidee, okay. Bacon, I love it. I thought it would be fun to do. Grief bacon, okay, yeah. All right. Kummerschlag. Treppenwitz. Okay, people, you're awesome. Anyway, I just wanted to do this for fun. But you see, what I'm trying to do is that we just learned it, but then we didn't think about it, and there is this gap. This is a desirable difficulty. And if you genuinely try to recall them, your brain engine is revving trying to get them to it. Torshenpanik. Torschlusspanik. I love this. I'm going to keep this. Something like YOLO. I love it. You got a gate closing. I did say that. Okay, here they are. Fanweh, Schnapsidee, Torschlusspanik, Treppenwitz, Kummerspeck. No, this is not a German lesson, but I thought it would be fun to do something like that. Okay, so how can we actually integrate desirable difficulties in training programs? Space it out. Don't serve it as a buffet. Don't dump it on the learners. It's boring, and they're not going to recall it, they're not going to retain it, they're not going to love it. Motivation is dependent on self-efficacy. How well you can do something leaves them motivated way more. They're not going to come to you with motivation. You got to create it by giving them taste of success. Use microlearning. I did my PhD writing a thesis about microlearning. Offer lots of options for recall. I've been sort of trying to walk the talk in this presentation as much as I could, but of course there's limited time and how I could do it. But in your training design, make it a culture, make it a habit. Don't skimp on the think part. Get your learners to think about the content. Don't just offer it to them. And that's your creativity. You're all such creative folks here. I'm here to tell you the science. Mix the tasks up, but carefully, because mixing doesn't mean that now you want to mix like all kinds of things. Something related. You know, if you're talking about how to give effective feedback and you've talked about it, then maybe you could change the scenario or something, but it's within the similar context of things. Yet different, similar yet different. Vary the task environment. If they are able to do something in a certain environment, similar task, can they do that in a different, because the context, the task environment adds challenge. Give them that chance to do that. And timely, gradually, using the judgment, pull back on the feedback. Right? Okay, something I want you to remember. Desirable difficulties have two core features. First, they, yes, do require the learners to think harder about the material, because we've just made it slightly so challenging by adding time or contextual interference or something for them to think about it. But that is the difficulty part, yes, but that's not the goal. The goal, difficulty is just a medium to our means that we want to make it desirable. Extra effort needed to think leads to learning. And I really do think, it's not a major component of my presentation today, but I really do think a conversation about this is absolutely necessary with people you're working with. All of a sudden dropping things like that, and of course up your knowledge first. Understand what desirable difficulties are with a lot more depth of reading, connecting with people who talk about this, looking at examples, breaking it open and see, oh, is this desirable or was it just difficult and did not lead to any outcome that I wanted, right? So think about that, but so have that conversation too. Just implementing is going to be, I think yesterday we were talking about this idea, are we ready? Are we ready, or we're going to adopt something? But readiness is a really essential thing too, and gain the knowledge. Word of caution, not all difficulties are desirable. This basically means that just because we think that we want to add the challenge, we don't want to put folks on a bridge we know is going to collapse. There's a popular word that's often used called productive struggle. I mean, struggle is not really productive, right? Like struggling. So you want to be very careful of testing, getting them to recall what they know. If I had not given you those German words and I asked you to recall them, that wouldn't be a fair desirable difficulty, right? So just the idea that yes, we want to integrate desirable difficulties, but from now on, every challenge is desirable, no. So we need to be really cautious. And I invite you and I encourage you to dig deeper into this topic. It's a really, really fascinating idea and makes for good quality, impactful learning experience for whoever is going through it, and leads to long-term learning. And it make you feel better when your design is leading to that impact, that behavior change that you had hoped for with this training. Just designing training is not enough, right? Oh, and if you love what I'm talking about, I have a free Science of Learning newsletter with my dear colleague Jim Hewitt. We teach at the University of Toronto together. We teach Master of Education students, Master of Teaching students. We talk about all kinds of things, cognitive science. It's free. You're welcome to access it and subscribe to it. And we write about all kinds of science and learning things, new research. We're basically translators of educational research. So folks who don't have the time, which many of us don't, or the comprehension level to understand the meta-analyses and just complex research ideas. But what does it mean for me in my practice? That's the kind of task we try to do. Okay. A quick brain dump. I'll give you a minute or two. This you could do on your own. There's no online thing for it. Just if you have a pen or paper or your phone, whatever, just write down 3 key takeaways from this session and what they mean for you in practice. You don't have to tell me, but I want you to give it that think that would be very beneficial. I want your memory to be modified. So take a couple of minutes. And I think in training, we have to embrace this kind of awkward silence. Thinking is so essential. We're thinking a lot less. No learning can happen without it. When you have your 3 takeaways, you can just give me a thumbs up so I know. Okay, perfect. Good. Great, thank you. Yeah, brain dump is just one of those things that there was this really amazing study they did. This is not a part of my slides, but I'll mention it. It was 2006. They had students in a study group who basically studied something for 7 minutes, took a 2-minute break, some distraction break, doing some basic math questions like 2 + 2, whatever, so they weren't thinking about the content. And then they did 7 minutes of study again. And then there was another group called study test, or study recall, you could call it. So this group did 7 minutes of reading, 2 minutes of distraction with simple math questions, and this particular group did not have access to the content, but they only had access to recall, their own memory, right? And then they did a later sort of assessment of how much they recall. They did it 5 minutes later, 2 days later, and a week later. 5 minutes later, the study folks were better, but the people who had done no study but study recall outperformed in the test of 2 days later and 1 week later, even though they read 7 minutes less. This is a beautiful study, really classic study from 2006. So brain dump's got a real big power. So you're here to learn. I know it's so easy to just, taking pictures of the slides, and I welcome people because you can catch up with everything that's happening. But at some point during the day, maybe in the speaker room or some kind of spot which you find quite, do a little recall for things. And what will happen is you'll actually own that knowledge so much more for your own self. Okay, and I will leave you with a digital handout that I've developed for you all. A lot of the stuff I said and more is in there with some resources for you. And yes, retrieval practice, and yes, desirable difficulties, and yes, role play questions that you'll have to answer. So take the QR code if you would like, and open it in your phones and save it or bookmark it. And if you lose it, I'm happy to share it with you as well. It's not a problem. Yeah, everybody got it? I just want to make sure that everybody has access to this. I think it's a great handout. I really like. No, seriously. I mean, I shouldn't be saying it, but I think it's really great. Awesome. And last but not the least, I think that's it. If you'd like to stay in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn. And thank you. We don't have a lot of time for questions, and I'm not sure if there's any questions on the chat. We do have about a minute, but I do want to take this time to thank you all for being such amazing learners and being here with me. And if you do have a question which we can't take for me on the stage, I'm happy to chat with you right after this session. So thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi, and thank you for attending the session. And I encourage all of you to complete the session evaluation located on the conference app and the ATD 25 virtual platform. And please enjoy the rest of your conference experience, learning, and networking. Thanks so much, Nidhi.